Tonight, after dinner, your gut bacteria are going to be hungry. Not the kind of hungry you notice, the kind that runs silently in the lower intestine in the absence of enough plant fiber to feed the ecosystem that has been living inside the human body for millions of years. The average person reading this consumes about 15 grams of dietary fiber a day. The Hadza of Tanzania, one of the last populations on Earth still eating the way ancient humans ate, consume between 100 and 150 grams every single day. That gap is not a dietary preference, it is an extinction event happening in your gut right now, in real time, one meal at a time. And to understand how we got here, to understand what ancient humans were actually eating when the hunt came back empty, you have to start with a number that changes everything. The daily big game hunting success rate among traditional forager populations is 2.2%, not 22, not even 12, 2.2. Which means almost every single day the hunt failed, and almost every single day the people who actually kept the group alive were not the ones who went out with spears. Here is the number the prehistoric documentaries skip past. The daily success rate for big game encounter hunting among traditional hunter-gatherers is 2.2%, not 22, not even 12, 2.2. That means on any given day, a hunter goes out, spends 4 hours tracking, reading terrain, reading wind, using every skill his community has spent years teaching him, and comes back empty-handed 97 to 98 times out of every 100. One large animal every 46 days, that is the average. Sit with that for a moment. Not 46 days across a group per hunter. One person hunting every single day will bring down a large animal roughly once every month and a half. The rest of the time, nothing. This is not bad luck. This is not a rough patch. This is the baseline reality of hunting large game, measured across multiple traditional foraging populations on multiple continents. The Hadza of Tanzania, the Aché of Paraguay, the Martu of Australia. Different animals, different terrain, different hunting techniques, same result. The daily failure rate is 97 to 98%. Everywhere researchers look. Now here is where it gets more complicated. On the rare day the hunt works, the meat gets shared widely, not because the hunter is feeling generous, but because large game cannot be economically defended. A carcass is too big for one family to eat before it rots, and the social rules around distribution in small bands are non-negotiable. You share the kill across the community, or the community stops trusting you, and then you starve the next time you fail, which is most days. Researchers tracking Hadza hunting data ran the specific numbers on what this means for the hunter's own family. After accounting for the failure rate and the sharing rules, a hunter's household retains a maximum of about 10% of the live weight of any animal he kills. When you calculate what that means in calories per hour of effort that actually feed his own children, not the community, his children, you get roughly 180 calories an hour, 180. For context, young children in the same camp, just wandering around picking berries and digging up roots with no specialized skill required, generate higher caloric return rates for their own families than adult male hunters do for theirs. The children are outperforming the hunters at feeding their own families, let that land. The whole romantic image, the skilled male provider, the hunt as the engine of prehistoric life, meat as the foundation of human evolution, is not supported by the numbers. The hunter was not feeding his family. He was feeding the community occasionally at a massive personal caloric cost to his own household in exchange for social capital and the reciprocal right to eat from other hunters' kills on the days he failed, which was almost every day. So this raises an obvious question. If hunting large game was this energetically irrational, if it produced less food for your own family than your children could gather without any training, why did men across every foraging culture on Earth dedicate almost all their time to it? That question has an answer. But the answer has nothing to do with food. We will come back to it. First, there is the matter of what actually kept people alive. 780,000 years ago, on the marshy shores of a large freshwater lake in what is now northern Israel, someone was doing meal prep, not foraging opportunistically, not grabbing whatever was at hand, planning, mapping multiple ecological zones, traveling between them, selecting specific plants from specific habitats, transporting them back to a central location, and processing them systematically with dedicated stone tools. The site is called Gesher Benot Ya'aqov, and it sits in the Dead Sea Rift along the ancient junction of the Arabian and African plates. The location matters because the waterlogged lake sediment preserved something that almost never survives at prehistoric sites: organic material. botanical remains, the evidence of plant-based food preparation that typically rots away and disappears from the archaeological record entirely. What survived here has been transforming our understanding of prehistoric diet for 20 years. The tools are pitted basalt slabs, heavy percussors and anvils with deep depressions hammered into their surfaces through repeated forceful strikes. The pits are specific, hemispherical, concentrated, worn smooth in ways that match only one type of use. These are nut-cracking tools. The same basic design, used by the same basic biomechanical technique, is still used by wild chimpanzees in West Africa today to crack open the thick-shelled oil palm nut, and by human foragers from West Africa to Southeast Asia to crack open a wide range of hard-shelled fruits. The 2025 study took the analysis further than anyone had managed before. Using sonication, high-frequency sound waves applied directly to the tool surfaces, researchers dislodged material from deep within the microscopic crevices of the pits, material that had been sealed there for 750,000 years. To confirm the extracted material came from the tool use and not from surrounding sediment contamination, they ran comparative analyses on sediment samples from the same layers. The result, 650 intact starch grains, identifiable, specific, belonging to 55 distinct plant taxa. The variety in that list is the part that rewrites the story. Water chestnuts, aquatic nuts growing in the shallow margins of the lake, requiring diving or waiting to harvest. Acorns from oak trees growing in upland forests several kilometers away, requiring travel, selection, collection and transport back to the site. Seeds from wild grasses in the surrounding terrestrial environment. Yellow water lily rhizomes dug from muddy lake beds. Fennel seeds from dry terrestrial slopes. These plants do not grow in the same place. Someone was moving between ecosystems, the lakeshore, the upland forest, the open grassland, identifying what was available in each, harvesting it, and bringing it to a single processing location. That is not opportunistic foraging. That is a supply chain. And it was running 780,000 years ago, operated by hominins who were almost certainly Homo erectus, a species that existed 500,000 years before modern humans emerged. This was not us. This was our ancestor's ancestor, with a brain significantly smaller than ours, running a food processing operation of genuine cognitive complexity. The kitchen on the shores of Paleo Lake Hula predates our species by 500,000 years, which raises an obvious question about who was doing the daily work of filling and operating it. The answer is not who the cave paintings show you. Before the analysis, before the data and the gene counts and the dental plaque sequencing, there is the physical reality of what it felt like to eat when the hunt failed. Because this is not an abstract question, it is a tactile one. Start in the Tanzanian dry season. The surface water is gone. The water holes that sustained the camp through the wet months have dried to cracked mud. The animals that came to drink there have moved on. The air sits heavy and still over the parched brush, and the ground underfoot is concrete. Sun-baked, compacted, red-brown laterite that has been baking since the last rain months ago. A Hadza woman moves through this landscape carrying an iron-tipped digging stick. Not searching visually, she already knows the general territory, knows roughly where the Vinya liana grows from years of working these same patches. What she is doing now is listening. She strikes the hard ground with the stick as she walks. Most of the time solid, dense, a short dead thud that tells her nothing useful is directly below. Then, different, lighter. A faint hollow resonance traveling up through the stick and into her hands before it fades. The sound of a cavity below the surface, a root system swollen with stored water and starch, sealed underground against the drought, waiting. She stops. She drives the stick into the earth. It takes body weight, full force, levering into the compacted soil, breaking through the surface. She digs, not delicately, but with the rhythm of someone who has done this 1,000 times, working the hole wider and deeper until the root system comes free. The root is fibrous, rough, covered in dirt. She peels it aggressively, working her thumbnail under the outer layer. What is inside is not soft or yielding. It is dense, slightly gummy, with the texture of something between a raw potato and a piece of wet wood. She puts it in her mouth. She is not eating it the way you eat something. She is chewing it for water, working it between her teeth to extract the liquid held in the cells, drawing it out through mechanical pressure. When she has gotten what she can, she spits out the fibrous wad, dry, exhausted, compacted into a ball of indigestible cellulose, and moves on to the next strike of the stick. This is hydration, this is calories, this is keeping a family alive through a season when the preferred foods are simply not there. Now move the lens to the western desert of Australia. A different woman, a different landscape. The red sand and spiky spinifex grass of the Martu territory, among the most arid environments where humans have ever consistently lived. But the same basic logic operating. She tosses a match into a clump of mature spinifex. The grass catches immediately, it is evolved to burn, and within minutes a controlled patch of maybe 20 hectares is reduced to blackened, smouldering stumps. The smoke rises in a column visible for kilometers. The smell is sharp and acrid, eucalyptus and dry grass char mixing in the hot air. Against the blackened ground, what was invisible before becomes readable. Tracks, tail drag marks. The precise, three-clawed footprints of a sand goanna, a large monitor lizard, 1.5 meters of muscle and protein living in a burrow beneath the roots of the cleared shrubs. The burn exposed the trail she could not have followed through the dense grass. She follows the tracks to the burrow entrance, angles her digging stick into the packed earth beside it, and works the animal out. The goanna does not come quietly. It twists and claws, using its tail as a whip. But the technique is practiced, efficient. She has done this more times than she can count. The result is reliable. 90% of the time, she comes home with meat. Not the glamorous communal feast meat of a large carcass. Smaller than that. Enough for her family, or shared with close kin, without the complex distribution rules that govern large game. Reliable, unglamorous, essential. Now move the lens back 780,000 years to the shores of Paleo Lake Hula. A hominin lifts a heavy basalt hammerstone, roughly the weight of a modern brick, and brings it down onto a thick-shelled water chestnut resting in the pitted depression of the anvil. The impact sends a percussive shock up through the hammerstone and into the hands. The chestnut resists, its shell is designed to resist, and takes a second strike, a third. On the fourth, it shatters. Inside, a dense, starchy seed, calorie-rich, requiring processing to unlock, requiring tools, technique, and knowledge of where in the lake margin these aquatic nuts grow and when they ripen. The fragments of shell go one way, the edible interior goes in the mouth. And here is the detail that connects all three of these scenes physically across 780,000 years of time. As that starchy seed is chewed, as the mechanical grinding of teeth begins to break down the complex carbohydrate chains, the saliva flooding the mouth is already working before swallowing. An enzyme called amylase, produced by glands in the jaw and secreted directly into the mouth, begins cleaving the starch molecules into simpler sugars. The result is a sudden, distinct sweetness. Not added, not processed. The sweetness of starch breaking down in real time, flooding taste receptors with glucose before the food even reaches the stomach. That sweetness was a signal, calories incoming, energy available. The threat of starvation held off for one more day. Your saliva produces that same sweetness right now. Every time you eat a carbohydrate, every time you chew bread long enough or hold a cracker on your tongue. The process running in your mouth at this moment is 780,000 years old. We will come back to what that means in your genome. Here is where the question from section 1 gets its answer. If hunting large game was this unreliable, 97% failure rate, children outperforming adult males at feeding their own households, then why did men across every foraging culture on Earth dedicate almost all their time to it? The answer is not food, the answer is status. In forager communities, the social hierarchy is not organized around who provides the most reliable calories. It is organized around who performs the most dramatic demonstration of capacity. A man who brings down a large animal, even once every 46 days, commands political capital that a man who digs roots every day cannot generate, regardless of how much more food he actually puts in front of his family. The hunt is not a food strategy, it is a reputation strategy. So who was actually feeding the children? An anthropologist at Penn State named Rebecca Bleachbird spent years in the western desert of Australia documenting Martu foraging across more than 1,300 adult sessions. Martu men hunt large game, kangaroos, large birds. Daily success rate, roughly 2%. Martu women hunt sand goannas with digging sticks and controlled fire. Daily success rate, 90%. And because small game is not subject to community-wide sharing demands, the woman who catches it feeds her own family directly. The quiet, daily, unglamorous 90% was the actual foundation of caloric security. The dramatic kill was the headline. The root and the goanna kept the children alive. Now here is what happened when the reliable work stopped. In the mid-20th century, Martu communities were forcibly relocated into government settlements. The women stopped burning. Within decades, 28 endemic Australian land mammal species went extinct. the highest rate of land mammal extinction ever recorded in a single region, not from disease or hunting, because the mosaic burns that maintained the entire ecosystem were gone. The women feeding their families were also managing a continent. When the knowledge stopped, the land fell apart. That consequence is not historical. The version playing out right now is inside your own body. The image most people carry of Neanderthals, Ice Age carnivores, frozen steppe, mammoth bones, apex hunters, meat from start to finish. That image is wrong. Calcified dental plaque functions as a microscopic time capsule, trapping food particles and bacteria for tens of thousands of years. In 2017, researchers sequenced ancient DNA from Neanderthal calculus across multiple sites. 2 individuals from El Cedron cave in Spain showed zero genetic trace of meat. 0. Pine nuts, edible mushrooms, forest moss, a purely plant-based diet assembled from what the forest around them provided, not from poverty of options, but from sophisticated knowledge of their local environment. Then it gets stranger. One of the El Cedron males had a visible dental abscess and a gastrointestinal parasite causing chronic diarrheal disease. His calculus contained something the others did not: the DNA of western balsam poplar. Poplar bark is rich in salicylic acid, the active compound in aspirin. He was self-medicating for pain. His calculus was also the only specimen containing Penicillium rubens, a naturally occurring mold that produces penicillin. He had a bacterial infection. He was consuming a natural antibiotic. This individual, 50,000 years ago, was treating an infected jaw with an analgesic from tree bark and an antibiotic from mold. 2 compounds modern pharmacology would synthesize thousands of years later. He had a pharmacy, it was the forest, and he knew how to read it. Your body kept records, not in language, in DNA. The gene AMY1 codes for salivary amylase, the enzyme that breaks down starch in your mouth before it reaches your stomach. The sweet taste when you chew bread too long? That is amylase working. A chimpanzee has 2 copies of the AMY1 gene. The average human has 6.72. Some individuals carry up to 14. This amplification happened because the ability to extract more glucose from a root faster than the person next to you was during 97% daily hunting failure. The difference between enough energy and not enough. The lineages that relied most heavily on starchy fallback foods accumulated more copies. Their children survived more often. The copies spread. Your ancestors' diets are written in your saliva. Your body voted on what kept people alive. It voted for the root, not the mammoth. Section 7. The bill we are still paying. The Hadza consume between 100 and 150 grams of dietary fiber every day. The average American consumes 15. A researcher at Stanford named Justin Sonnenberg spent years comparing Hadza gut microbiomes to urban Americans. The Hadza microbiome fluctuates seasonally, hundreds of species expanding and contracting with the food supply, alive and responsive. The modern industrialized microbiome is static. Many of the bacterial species cycling through Hadza guts are absent from Western guts entirely, not dormant, gone. When gut bacteria run out of plant fiber, they do not wait. They begin consuming the mucus lining of the intestinal wall, the barrier separating the microbiome from the bloodstream. When that barrier thins, the immune system detects microbial activity too close to the intestinal wall and fires a broad inflammatory response continuously. That chronic low-grade inflammation is what researchers now link to inflammatory bowel conditions, rheumatoid arthritis, and type 1 diabetes, conditions that ancestral populations simply did not show at these rates. A 2016 study found that 4 consecutive generations of low-fiber feeding produced permanent microbial extinction. Species that disappeared did not return when fiber was reintroduced. The habitat had been empty too long. 4 generations. In human terms, that timeline is now. The 780,000-year-old kitchen was not just preserving calories, it was maintaining the ecosystem inside the body that ran on what it processed. We stopped feeding it.